people, and welcome to Lightbringer Radio. Whoa, my candle just burned a ton. There was just a bunch of smoke coming from it, and there was no reason. Okay, I'm sitting at my altar right now. My computer and my mic is on my altar, so it's the first time I've sat here in probably, I know, at least 2 months. Way more than that probably, but welcome to this beautiful sacred space. If you don't know me, my name is Raven. How do I even begin to explain myself? I am a witch. I am a Taurus sun, Sagittarius moon, Scorpio rising. I call myself a witchcraft educator. I've taught classes in the past. I've apprenticed covens. I've, danced in the witch world a lot. I also am a sociologist. I went to school for it and then dropped out because, and I've lived a lot of lives, I guess, but my more formal resume we can talk about another time, but really why I'm here, why I'm talking to you, why I'm wanting to start having this conversation in the form of this podcast is because I've always been a person who's focused and loved the shadow, loved the things that people don't normally talk about. I love helping people over the threshold of, newness and change and pain and emergence, It is something I'm incredibly passionate about, whether I'm teaching about it or whether I'm really just sitting with someone and hearing them go through the trials of life. It's something I've always been incredibly passionate about, and it's actually something that I've attempted several times to make into a career, but have for some reason always fumbled, or it's not worked, or something. It's been too much, too draining, Where I come to you now, or where I'm coming from to you, is that I am actually going through my dark night of the soul. Also, sorry if in the background you hear kids crying and yelling and stuff. I actually live right next to a daycare, so you might actually hear that in the background. Hopefully I will get it out somehow, but someone's having a rough time right now, so look, we all are, kid, I understand. I've wanted to start sharing about my journey that I'm going through, about tools that I'm using, about how I'm attempting desperately to live a magical life, even though I'm in the darkest times of my life so far. And I would love to share that, not from a place of exhibitionism. Sorry about the beeps. I guess I should turn that off, huh? Not in terms of exhibitionism, but I've just always been a person who processes and understands best by sharing and by talking things out. And, maybe it's a Sagittarius in me, but it's something that I've always felt like I'm really good at doing, is harnessing pain and harnessing story and harnessing experience into lessons for other people. Okay, I had to stop for a second because that kid was going ape shit, but I think it stopped now. Like I said before, kid, I understand. The one thing that I've always wanted to be is a priestess. Actually, I don't even know if that's the right word. It's very gendered, but I've always wanted to be a sage. I've always wanted to be a resource. I've always wanted to be the wise witch at the edge of the town. And as I've tried to step into these shoes and teach classes and be resources for people, I've struggled against being young or not being deemed trustworthy because I'm young. And what that really has to do with this, though, is that in order to be a person who walks other people across thresholds, especially thresholds of death and of change and of life adjustment and ego death and pain and sorrow and joy too, in order for me to be able to walk people across those thresholds or to help people in the middle of them, I also need the experience. And that's what I'm going through right now. That's what I'm going through right now. I am in my dark night of the soul. For a little bit of context, April 2020 is when I moved into my death year. And that's numerologically, which I can talk about on another episode in more detail. But numerologically, I moved into death late April of last year. In that time, my entire life changed. My partner was up for a job promotion of a super cool job that would have ended with us moving to LA. It was taken away from us within a month. I lost my job. That was what I considered to be like my big break. It was a really important job to me that allowed me to step into my power in a really beautiful way. And within literally 2 weeks, it all dissolved in a way that was incredibly painful. I broke up with my best friend this year. The best friend that's like the always best friend. That happened this year. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and also had my entire digestive system fail on me. And at one point had to drink powder instead of food because my body couldn't process food. Still recovering from that, to be honest. My partner and I had to move back home and in with family because we no longer could afford to keep living where we were. Literally kind of piece by piece by piece, my life has fallen apart. And those are all just external things. Internally has been the biggest process of soul death, really. An ego death, where every single thing that I held myself to be, like I mentioned earlier that I called myself a witchcraft educator, but do I? Can I call myself that? Am I even a witch anymore? Am I an educator anymore? Can I even call myself a sociologist or a writer or, these titles that I held so closely to my chest? Like, who even is that person? Because it doesn't feel like me. Me right now feels like a complete shell of a human. And so, why I share that is that that's the perspective and the context of this podcast. What I really want this to be is, I keep thinking of, I need to look the book up, to be honest. There was a book that was released where a pretty high-level neurologist, brain doctor, she had a stroke herself. And then wrote a book about the actual process and what it felt like and what she experienced having a stroke, being the person having it and also the person who understood the brain. So her research is incredibly thorough because you have both of those viewpoints. That's kind of what I would like to do here in this podcast is, I have always been a champion and priestess of shadow work. The class that I used to teach is called Walking the Shadow Path. I'm not afraid, and I am incredibly familiar with painful aspects of life, of thresholds that none of us really want to walk through, of how much bravery and sadness and also elation comes with being our true, authentic selves. I love helping people over that threshold and holding their soft spaces so that they can hold it softly too. But like with most priestesses, witches, energy workers, any kind of person who does this work, very frequently you are the last one that you do the work on. And that's what this podcast will be. It'll be a lot of me sharing my experience and what I'm going through. It'll also, of course, because it's me, also be some advice if you're wanting to take it based on my own experiences, because I will be doing the work. But mostly this podcast, I think, will be accountability for myself, in that I need to get out of this hole. It's time. This April passed into temperance, thankfully. And temperance, I'm famous for saying, is just death with a party hat on. And so far, that's been pretty accurate, considering it's like late May now. But temperance is all about trusting the universe. Temperance is all about alchemizing what died in your death year, what you let fall off of you, and what was ripped from your claws, and alchemizing that into something that'll move you forward. It's a Sagittarius sign. And so that's where I'm coming to this from. The other thing is that in this year, in time of COVID, in all of the things that have been happening in my life, I've also lost faith in basically everything. I have lost faith in God, in spirit, whatever you would call it. I've been in more or less radio silence with my deities, who don't really talk to me anymore. They basically, like, it's the equivalent of, like, I'm in a room with them and they're sitting at a conference table and I'm standing at the front of the room, and all of them have, like, stern faces and they're, like, fingers crossed in front of their mouths and they're just waiting for me to talk. That's what it feels like. And so a lot of this also will be reclaiming what spirituality means to me, what witchcraft means to me, what removing imperialism from my witchcraft looks like to me, and appropriation from my witchcraft and what that looks like to me. I think there's going to be a lot of questions in this podcast. I think there's going to be a lot of dialogue. And ultimately, I hope that you will join me in this dialogue. But, I'm at a point of questioning everything that I believed before. And slowly, I will start rebuilding it to the point where, maybe at some point I will become a priestess again. Or at least in my heart, I'll become a priestess. So I know that's a little amorphous, but that's what you can expect with Lightbringer Radio. Like I said, I'm jokingly calling this, like, first section of my experience How to Make a Priestess, because we're just gonna go through this experience together. Really, what I want to investigate and talk about and have dialogue around and practice is how to live magically, even in the darkest of times. Even when you feel like there is nothing to get out of bed for. What does living magically look like then? Because God knows anyone who's in that circumstance needs magic. So that's what I want to talk about here. Welcome. This will be an incredibly authentic space. I will try and be very diligent about trigger warnings and content warnings with each podcast, but really it's my goal here to be incredibly authentic and try to provide as much context and as much help as I possibly can. And really, at the end of the day, I'm saying that to myself. Using this to help myself. So, welcome in. I cannot wait to see what this morphs into, and I'm so happy that you stopped by. Till next time.